Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So, dear friends, I heard that our American government has taken up a new policy that all the different departments and branches and bureaus in the federal government are supposed to consider climate change, whether it's the General Services Administration or Office of Personnel Management or Treasury Department or whatever department it is. They're supposed to think the decisions that we make, what is the relation to climate change? And we also hear more and more that smart Buddhist teachers see that we are in a circumstance, and how we practice the Dhamma is also affected by climate change. And we can think about how this reality has to be digested into our practice, and how our practice will have an effect of how we live in this world and how our life has an impact on coping with climate change. There were a few suttas that seem to acknowledge that the world, is going to go into these desperate conditions from time to time. There's one called the Seven Sons. It's very famous in the Anguttara Nikaya, in the Book of Sevens. It's like a dystopian science fiction book with different, describing different catastrophes that can happen. For example, one of them, one of the sons will come to be, and the water remaining in the ocean will be reduced and reduced and reduced until it's only waist high, only knee high, or even ankle high. Like the time in the autumn when the rain falls heavily and the water remains here and there in the cow's hoof print. In the same way, the entire water in the ocean just remains here and there in puddles, like the cow's hoof print. And when this sun appears, there's not enough water in the great ocean even to wet one joint of the toe. So impermanent are conditions, so unreliable are conditions. This is quite enough for you to become disillusioned, dispassionate, and free regarding all conditions. But I don't think that this means that we undertake some kind of a spiritual bypass towards global warming. It's quite the opposite. It's that the worldly urgency, the worldly activation that we can feel when we see and when we go through the whatever grieving or whatever kind of process we're going through about the changes in our world, that are happening because of climate change. That it's a challenge to how much we think we've really become a mature spiritual practitioner who's not clinging and not grasping. So we may be that we've already become the kind of person who's not greedy for fame, not greedy for accumulating personal wealth, not greedy for having a high status, not greedy for praise, not greedy for love, not greedy for sensual pleasures and so on. And so we think that we're quite developed in our spiritual practice. And we've gained a certain kind of a detachment from the worldly winds. And yet when we see, kind of like loss at a different level, we say, oh, there's something that I just like assumed was like, it was like part of me, is that I live in a beautiful world. And realizing there was something we were clinging to that still needs to be let go of if we were to become finally dispassionate and freed regarding everything conditioned. In the sutta that we were studying, this is what I mentioned when I was doing the offering you a kind of a preliminary contemplation or a thought experience, a thought experiment to undertake at the beginning of this meditation session, seeing that when one understands the impermanence of every single sense contact, the impermanence and emptiness of the objects of sight, the impermanence and emptiness of the internal base of sight, the eye base, the impermanence of our eye consciousness, our own consciousness, so that our own self and the objective world, all of it impermanent, all of it fading, perishing, ceasing. And when we understand that, and whatever tendency we had to grasping, clinging and craving around sight evaporates, because there's really nothing to hold on to. And then equanimity arises through right understanding. We see that in the past, present, future, all sights are impermanent. All sights are unsatisfactory. And so both the happiness of being freed from craving and the equanimity of that can both arise. I noticed something going on several years ago, maybe even like a decade ago, that seemed to be related to climate change. And I didn't see it that much discussed anywhere. But it seemed really obvious to me that the wealthy the top people in the world, who are all, not all of them, but a lot of the top people in the world are quite smart, and they have access to a lot of information. And what I felt is that no matter what they say, that the top most powerful people in the world actually know what's going on. And I was seeing this tremendous increase of greed, tremendous increase of the top people wanting to greatly expand their empires, like trying to become 1,000 times more powerful, wealthy, or whatever. compared with an ordinary person. And it seemed to me that that was a sort of a kind of a, like a knee-jerk reaction of feeling this existential anxiety, like I may not survive, or my family and my descendants, me and my grandchildren can be wiped out. Oh my gosh, let me build up a safe castle, or get a safe island, or a safe empire, or some kind of a safe domain. And then more recently, the other thing that I've been noticed is that it seems to me that killing is having a comeback. We know that for all the ups and downs of history, of course, there have been, humans have had killing sprees many times in the history of the world, but since in the period from like at the end of World War II up until the beginning of the 21st century, the studies showed that actually the amount of deaths from warfare had a really significant decline, and the world didn't become more peaceful. But now that little spell of peace has gone by, and it seems like the world is again becoming more warlike, more hostile, more genocidal. In this, even if it's like I don't know if it's subconscious or what, but so that me and my people can make it through the coming crisis, let me just wipe out entire other groups of people. Or if I'm like not in the ruling class and I don't have the capacity to commit an entire genocide, at least I could get some weapons and go down and shoot a few people. This was predicted in another sutta. This is in the Digha Nikaya called Chakravarti Sutta, about the wheel-turning king. It describes how there's like a gradual decline and deterioration of the morality of people, and that the government becomes increasingly more brutal as they see that, like just taking, somebody who's doing a bad deed or stealing or something like that, that just talking to them isn't enough, so you'll have to torture them, and so on and so on. And the world just declines and declines until the lifespan becomes very short. Children are sexually exploited. There are periods of warfare. The world is full of hostility. People are hostile towards each other with acute ill will, malevolence, thoughts of murder. Even a mother will feel like this for her child, the child for its mother, father for child, child for father, brother for sister, sister for brother. They'll be just like a deer hunter when he sees a deer, full of hostility, ill will, malevolence, and thought of killing. But in this fable that's given in the Chakravarti Sutta, some people, when there's this period of open warfare throughout the whole society, some people think, let us be neither perpetrators nor victims. And they go and they hide out in the jungle. And they live on roots and fruits in the jungle for a period of time. And then when the war is over, they creep out again from their hiding place. And they look around at the scene of desolation until they see another person. But they see others who are also alive. And they feel so joyful, and they come together and embrace one another and say, oh, friend, dear friend, are you alive? how wonderful that we're alive. And then they think it was because of unskillful behavior that there was so much loss. Let's do what's skillful. And the first thing they think, let's refrain from killing living creatures. Undertake this skillful thing and live by it. So, just the same way, if we're considering our Dhamma in the light of climate change, could we think of joyfully knowing we're still alive, it's not over yet, and can we give up killing living creatures, renounce violence, be scrupulous and kind, full of compassion for all living beings, and in each thing that we do, when we go shopping, when we go to work, when we choose how we're going to travel around, when we choose what kind of house to have, what kind of things to have, how we should speak, what we should be speaking about. When we go online and talk to our friends on Facebook, how should we talk to them? Can we prioritize a really powerful consideration for life and for preserving and caring for life? And just imagine that we could, by filling our mind with this scrupulous and kind compassion for life, could we create a world in which life is able to thrive and be abundant, in a life where there's enough that this existential anxiety that's provoking so much unskillful greed and unskillful violence, that existential anxiety can subside. So instead of just taking it as a given that our world is going to just be getting more and more deep in crisis and trying to, I don't know what, go into some kind of a shell and just think that we can practice without awareness of the evolving crisis of our world. Instead, can our practice take the idea, well, we're still alive, and let us start with morality and undertake protecting life. May we know that meditation is the source of tranquility and joy, and that tranquility and joy that we gain in meditation is both a condition for our further making progress on the spiritual path and having a chance to develop noble attainments, because we won't get to stream entry or any kind of noble attainments unless we can access gladness and joy. And also this gladness and joy can help us to be as we should be in the world, as a a spot of radiant beauty, they can keep us from being overtaken by anxiety or negative emotion, and also can be helpful to others. So this is my Dhamma reflection for today, and I've left plenty of time to talk about it. We have got a small group here, just Sharanya, Bob, Maureen, Gutierrez, and here in the room we have Navas Damavara, Tavira, Linda, and Brenna. So keeping in mind that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there may be 6 or 7 who are